aerodynamic. All right. So hello everyone, welcome. Now we're going to see how can you gain top speed in F123. What are the things that you can adjust in the available setup screen to make sure you go faster in a straight line in the game. Now, obviously, we're not going to be covering any other things like adjusting cornering, balance, and whatnot in this one, but in the next one, we'll be talking about that. So, first one, we are in Monza for obvious reasons to see why certain changes that we do going to affect the changes, the top speed in some way. Then we're going to have to look at some settings here that are going to be more influential than the others. So number one, if you want to increase your top speed, you have to adjust your aerodynamics, which is your front and rear wing. Okay, so rear wing is draggier than the front wing. What that means is when you increase the rear wing by 1 versus you increase the front wing by 1, you're going to be getting more drag when you increase the rear wing. All right, so rear wing, it's going to generate a lot more downforce also. Going to generate downforce on the rear, but it's going to increase your drag more than the front wing. So if you are looking to gain at the top end speed by the end of the straight or something, if you are really concerned with the top speed, you have to reduce your rear wing first, and then you can start adjusting your front wing also. Now usually if you take this preset and you work it out, or if you take the world record setup from time trial, which is usually what I do also from time to time, I will, let's say the current world record setup is a 9.7, right? Now if I feel I want more top speed, I'll go down on the front and rear wing by 1, just to make sure the car doesn't feel too off balance. If you increase the front wing, sometimes the car can be more oversteery. If you reduce the rear wing only, it can be a bit more oversteery as well. So you want to go down 1 click each together to try it out. Okay, so now lowering rear wing and front wing will definitely give you more top speed. What I found is if you lower about just the rear wing alone, if you reduce it by 6 clicks, when I was testing out, I gained 3 kph. So what that means is when you reduce 2 clicks of rear wing, you gain 1 kph, only the rear wing. All right, whereas if you want to gain the same 1 kph by the front wing adjustment, you'll have to drop it by 3 or 4 depending on the track and setup. All right, so 3 or 4. So conclusion, if you drop both by 1 also, you're going to be roughly gaining 1 kph. Cool. Now second way to increase your top speed, not the most effective way. Of course, the most effective way is going to be your aerodynamics. Second effective way is going to be through your suspension setup, particularly front and rear suspension and the front and rear ride height. Now theoretically, front ride height at the maximum, rear ride height at the minimum gives you best top speed, whereas front suspension maximum and rear suspension the softest is also going to make sure that the front stays high and stiff, low stays low and soft. So you get more negative rake. More negative rake means you get better top speed. But if you look at this monster of a ride height setup, this is not going to be drivable at all. It's so much understeer that you're probably going to lock up even when you're on 50 brake bias. Try it out, and I'll be sure you won't like it like I did in the past 3-4 hours figuring out the setup. So from the default, like as it is, you can go down on your front suspension. Not necessarily it's going to gain you time, but let's say the world record setup that you take, it's usually around the middle range for suspension setup. If you want to gain top speed by adjusting front suspension, go higher. So this is going to make sure that the front of your car collapses slower while you're gaining speed. While it's gaining load, it's going to drop down slower. It's going to possibly give you better top speed, but if it does not, then just use the front suspension that you already have in that setup. Rear suspension, you can go as slow as you want. When I tried it out, when I went to 1 rear suspension, it definitely improved my top speed by 1 kph from 17 all the way down to 1. But that made the rear a bit more unstable, a lot more unstable, to a point where out of parabolica it is just oversteering. So there's no point of running that low of a suspension. You can still run it low, but you have to compensate with other parts of a setup. Maybe you want to increase your rear wing or lower your front wing to compensate for that. Now, specifically speaking of the meta that it is right now, you can get away with somewhere around 10, 6, even 5 to 10 or 15. So this is like the sweet spot. You want to go as low as you want, correct? But otherwise, if you're not confident of touching your suspension, leave it as it is, because you don't want to mess up the balance of your car. You can always go high on the front ride height. So increasing your front ride height is going to increase top speed very little. You will not even notice it. In fact, one click of front wing has more effect than going 3-4 clicks higher on the ride height. So again, you don't want to be touching the front ride height if you want to increase your top speed. Keep it as it is and you'll be just fine. But the one tip I can give you is, if let's say the setup that you have, it is a bit oversteer, like there's a lot of rotation that you can't control, to make sure that you don't oversteer into entry or exit of corners, you can increase the front ride height. This will introduce a little bit of understeer into the car and make the setup more drivable. You can go higher and higher, and make the car a bit more drivable to a point where you like it. And at some point, it's gonna start feeling bad again. You have too much understeer. So from the default that you get, this increase one click, you might be okay. And this will not affect your top speed in any bad way. You will not even notice the gain or loss. So that's a good thing. Front ride height, rear ride height, it's not gonna affect your top speed noticeably if you adjust by one click. Unless you do something stupid like keep going higher and higher. This is gonna be bad, because when you go higher on the ride height, too high in a way, you're reducing the amount of grip you're generating from the underfloor in this game, like in real life. So you don't want to go too high. Keep it at the default of the setup that you get, and you'll be fine. Now, next part, in terms of straight line speed, in the previous game in F122 and before, when you play around with the suspension geometry, you can gain lap time. Alright, in the previous meta, last year's game and previous games, you want to have like this, what we call right, left. Basically means minimum negative camber on the front and rear, and left means minimum toe. So camber is when you look from the top of the car or from the front of the car, you can see the tires are leaning outwards a bit. Alright, so leaning outwards a bit, coming out of the body. And toe is basically when you look from the top of the car, your front wheels, you can see they are pointing outwards a bit. Alright, that's front toe out, whereas the rear wheels, they are pointed inwards, so that's rear toe in. So what this does is, camber, it's as minimum as it would get from the front and the rear. Front toe is is as minimum as it gets. 0.00 means it's completely straight, whereas the rear toe, there's always a little bit of rear toe in. If you go higher here, you're increasing the rear toe in. Previous games, it was quite obvious when you did that, you can lose a bit of top speed. In this game, well, so far, when I tested it in Monza, one of the most top speed circuits, along with Vegas and Mexico on the straight at least, you can do this, the complete opposite, and you barely notice any loss of top speed. Maybe at the worst case, it's half a kph drop, but you don't notice it at all. Now, why is this information good for you? Because if you're looking for top speed and blah blah blah, you don't need to adjust suspension geometry at all. Use this only for your adjustment of cornering behavior. So do whatever you want with it. And finally, tire pressures. Now, like I mentioned, we're talking about how to increase top speed. Again, if you're carrying over from the previous game, you might want to experiment. You may have thought, let's experiment with the tire pressures and see if they are going to increase your top speed or not. Well, let me give you the answer. It's no. Minimum pressures versus maximum pressures, at least in Monza here in downforce, it does not increase or decrease your top speed in any noticeable sense. What that means, you can run maximum pressure front, minimum pressure rear, or minimum front, maximum rear, or middle all, maximum all, minimum all. Any weird combination that you can think of, even that something that's not drivable, it's going to give you about the same top speed. Again, minimum to maximum all, there's no difference that you can notice. So use the tire pressures to adjust the tire temperatures for your race. Okay, so you want to keep it as low as possible. Again, we'll go into this when we come to topics of like how to manage tire temperatures, tires and all in the next part of the series. So there you go. Let's summarize it, how to gain top speed in this game. Realistically, you only want to adjust the front and rear wing. This is going to give you the most amount of gains in the top speed. If you increase downforce, of course you're going to be losing a lot more. But again, like you see, default setups are quite understated, right? Now if you go low on the rear wing, let's say the world record setup is using something like this. So you go down 3 clicks on the rear wing, you're going to be getting roughly about 1.5 kph to almost 2 kph gain in the top speed. 4 clicks, so about 2 kph faster. And then when you go from 8 to 9 wing, you probably won't even notice the drop in top speed. So that's how powerful the front wing is in terms of generating downforce without giving too much drag. So it's much more efficient. Rear wing, it's going to have a lot more effect on the top speed. So start off with adjusting your front wing and rear wing to get a bit more top speed, and then the rest of the setup, just forget about it. Don't even have to bother about tire pressures if you want to gain top speed in a race setup. Don't have to bother about suspension and ride height. If you're keeping it at the default, you're not going to gain any more than just increasing 1 or 2 clicks. You're not going to gain at all, nothing noticeable. And then suspension geometry, whether min or max or whatever weight combination, you're not gaining anything. So there you go. Summary, just front and rear wing. That's how you gain top speed in F1 23.